Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series. As always, I am your host, constant reader Scott Daly, and I'm joined by my co-host and Ka-baby, Matt Freeman.
Enough! I'll allow it from the rest of them, but not from you. I won't take a tongue whipping from you, Sai.
Ow, my nerve, pressure points. Get it, folks? It's like Andy. This week on the show, we continue Part 3 Wolves by talking about chapters 3, 4, and 5. In this week's reading, Jake gets to go on his own adventure to the mysterious Dogan, and then Callahan heads back to New York to look up a zip code at a library like some kind of old person. Then it's time for the final gathering of the folken, and the questions are asked for the last time. Less than a week till the wolves arrive, and as Jake asks, can they win? Matt, what do you think about this week's reading?
Oh, this is great. I mean, we have some really great, really fun, intense, scary Jake stuff toward the beginning. We get some really cool foreboding moments with Andy. We get evil cacti. That's all fun. That's all good. And then we move on. We're back with our Ka-tet. Seems like they're all going to be honest with each other again, but then they're not at all. So that's sad. So Scott, I'm going to make a bold prediction. I'm going to predict that next week is when the climax of this book is going to occur. Wow,
your most out there prediction yet. I don't know, Matt. I don't know.
And coincidentally, next week is also the last part of this book. Completely unrelated to my prediction.
Totally unrelated. Unrelated.
But yeah, no. Like the reason I mentioned that there is to say, like, we're in a sense we're cutting it close, right? Like the Ka-tet is still not together. We only have one more, week of reading, one little, relatively speaking, little chunk of this book left. Mm-hmm. So it's like, are they going to get it together by the end of this book, or is this going to be like an ongoing rift? I really don't know at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to find out next week, but I agree with you. I think there's a lot of fun. We've talked about this several times throughout the course of these books before about how there's some moments in the story that are just moments I don't remember that well, because like when you're reading these books kind of in quick succession, when you're just like, you're not stopping and you're just reading right through, some of the smaller moments get lost a little bit. And I think that was some of these chapters for me this week where I didn't remember what happened in them as clearly as I did some of the other big moments in the story. And so it was really fun kind of getting to revisit these chapters and taking a long time with them, taking a long time thinking about Jake's little adventure that he goes on, taking a long time thinking about what Callahan's trip to New York is like and what it means to him. And then, of course, taking a time thinking of Roland's big, wonderful speech and how the politics of the town all like come to play in this one final moment that we've been building to this entire book. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
It is. I love it.
All right, let's jump right into it. But before we do that, Matt, I just want to remind everyone, if you didn't listen all the way to the end of last week's episode, which if not, shame on you. Last week on our other podcast, our kind of film variety podcast called The Doofcast, we did watch and talk about a Stephen King adaptation. We talked about the Frank Darabont 2007 film, The Mist. It was a really fun conversation between Matt and I went back and listened to that episode after I finished putting it all together and really enjoyed it. So if you have not listened to that yet and you like The Mist, which of course you do, right? Of course you do. You should listen to that episode.
And I'm going to help you out right now and just say, go into your podcatcher, Google or search The Doofcast, and then subscribe now.
Yeah, right now.
Instead of saying, I'll do it at the end of the episode, because you'll forget. And I'm not making fun of you. It's just, this is what I always do. And so I'm helping you.
I'm a little biased, but I think we're pretty good at talking about movies too.
I think you'd enjoy it. If you enjoy this, you'd enjoy that.
Yeah, I think so too. The Doofcast. That's it. That's us plugging ourselves at the beginning and the end of the show, because you can never plug yourself enough.
That's right. And we usually don't do that. So, be patient with us, please. Thank you.
All right, Matt, let's get into it and let's talk about chapter 3, titled The Dogan, Part 2. But I thought that was just a throwaway reference in a book that didn't mean anything.
It was meaningless.
Our reading this week begins with Jake's nighttime adventures after Roland and Eddie pass the proverbial responsibility torch off to him at the end of last week's reading.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that I think the Jake bits are some of my favorite pieces of the Dark Tower.
Okay.
I think you've said something along these lines, but King really respects kids. He really gives Jake like a full sense of personhood and intelligence. You know, he's a full-fledged, fully developed character you really empathize with. All he really lacks is life experience.
Yeah.
And you know, it makes me excited to read it eventually, because I understand that it has a lot of kid stuff in it, and like just based on seeing how King treats kids, I'm sort of like looking forward to that actually.
Yeah. You could say that it is about kid stuff. Yeah, and I think if you like Jake, then yeah, you're gonna like it, and plenty of other Stephen King stories. Maybe that one that we're gonna do a bonus episode on soon called Stand By Me, because that has a lot of kids in it, Matt.
Awesome.
But no, yeah, King has this way, and I'm not even sure. I've never really taken the time to sit down and think about exactly why or how, but he has this way of capturing childhood and the experience of being a kid in a way that not many other authors I've read have. It always feels like it's like an adult putting on what they think being a kid is like. For when I read Stephen King's child characters, it's like, oh yeah, I remember thinking that way. I remember my brain working that way and coming to those conclusions and seeing the world as this incredible and powerful and magical place that I clearly don't fully understand, and how that's scary but exciting. And I don't know how he does it, man. And one day maybe we will get to do it, and we can like spend some time really digging into the way he constructs the world that way, because it is powerful. And I don't ever remember being a kid except when I read it. When I read it, I remember what it was like to be a kid, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, if I had to guess, having not read it, but having read, you know, Jake's parts of the story, I would say that like our emotions actually smooth out as we get older. You get less emotional as you get older, and we tend to forget, and almost willfully forget, how tumultuous and painful just almost like everyday things could be as a child. I mean, picture a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old just bursting into tears over the slightest thing, like that. They're actually that sad. and that's kind of what it is to be a kid, is like you feel everything much more strongly, but it's still real. And that's what jumps out about Jake in these chapters, is like the things he's going through. He's reacting the way an adult would react. It's just the first time he's ever had to deal with certain kinds of situations, and so it's more so.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, because this immense feeling of confusion and fear at like having to like tell on his best friend's dad is such a distinctly childish thing. I mean, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that in like his foremost, he just found out that who the traitor to the entire town is, this man that is willingly damning 100 children, and the thing he is most worried about is like, oh, this is gonna really crush my friend. And yeah, like of course it is, but yeah, and I think an adult would still feel that too, but yeah, he feels it much more acutely. And I think that makes the moment so much more powerful, because you do recognize the kid nature of that, and you recognize, that I remember when emotions were that strong.
I remember the first time I had to betray someone.
But not the last.
Not the last,
Matt.
Yep.
That's great. Let's keep that in mind as we go through Jake's parts here.
Cool.
There is, because we're spending a lot of time this chapter with Jake, there is a lot of quality Oi time this week, Matt. Jake teaches Oi that MOON spells moon, and to wake him up when he sees the moon rise by saying those words. And I love this here. I'm going to go to sleep, but when the moon rises, I want you to wake me up. Quietly, do we ken? Ken, which might mean something or nothing. Or if someone had been taking wagers on it, Jake would have bet on something. He had great faith in Oi. Or maybe it was love. Or maybe those things were the same.
Man, that's great. That's really beautiful. And I think it's also really tied into what I think King is doing with this part of the story, because, Roland, he loves his Ka-tet.
Yeah.
But he doesn't seem to have like real faith in them because he keeps lying to them.
Sure. His faith wanes and waxes, I think.
Or his faith is sort of like conditional or within certain domains.
Sure.
So I think, it's great that we're saying that faith and love might be the same thing, because maybe what we're saying is, Roland loves them, but he doesn't love them fully. And that is what's keeping the Tet, spaced apart the way it is.
Yeah, I like that. And the one bond within this Tet that has never experienced that has been between Oy and Jake, that has been this like, they've never, kept secrets from each other, obviously, like he's an animal, but they've been, Oy has great faith in Jake and Jake has great faith in Oy, as it says right here. And they are bonded in a way that just about no one else in this group is. And there is something powerful about that. Yeah. And I do think you're right that this is King kind of very specifically bringing this up, because this is a book in which faith amongst the team has been tested. Trust has been tested. And I do think the love is still there. I don't want to make it seem like he doesn't love them, because I do think he does. We kind of said that from the very beginning. Like he's been unafraid to say how much he loves these people, but I think he's kind of still learning what love means in that regard.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Yeah. So I love the conversation that Benny Slightman and Jake have as they fall asleep in their room. And this kind of goes back to exactly what you and I were just talking about. I think there is a part of this that just so perfectly encapsulates what it is to be a kid. I remember sleepovers as a kid and just having those conversations during sleepovers where you're both like laying in your bed or your sleeping bag or whatever, and you're just talking. Like it's late at night. You've had such a great time at your sleepover. You don't want it to end. And so you're just talking and talking and talking. And these conversations never really end formally. Like there's never really a moment with both of you go, okay, it's time for us to go to sleep. They just kind of naturally peter out as one or both of you doze off. And it's just something that's just distinctly kid to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember those two, honestly, some of my most cherished memories. And I think this scene really nails it. I don't think I've ever really seen it captured like this before in any fiction.
I don't know how King remembers these things, but like I really don't, because like I read this and I was like, oh yes, I remember this feeling now. But if you had just had me sit down in a chair and say, think about sleepovers, like I wouldn't have been able to capture the emotion of this particular thing in my head.
Right. Yeah, I don't know either. I do wonder what his process is for stuff like this.
Yeah, he probably just has a great freaking memory, this guy.
I would guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. On the other hand, we just talked about how wonderful and quaint and adorable this conversation is. On the other hand, though, the content of the conversation is this. Jake will not be staying there once his business with the wolves is over. Jake's din and father figure scares Benny, and Jake's room at home isn't like Benny's at all, and it has a writing desk for writing with paper. I think what this is demonstrating is while they have become fast friends and there's this important sleepover nature of being a kid and being young and experiencing these things where you just can be friends with someone right away, I do think that this is kind of drawing out the fact that they will never be like great friends, right? That separation between them is inevitable, that this was never going to be something that was going to last, and it never could, because they're just too different. And I do think this is a perfect way to start this chapter, in which Jake confirms the worst fears he had about Benny's dad. I really love this. I really do.
Yeah, me too. And of course, it just hammers home in your gut on an emotional level how much this betrayal is going to hurt. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm stretching, maybe I'm reaching here, because I don't think Jake is like killing his friend. But no. You could say metaphorically that he is dropping his friend so that he could get the mission done, right? He's metaphorically dropping him into the pit so that he can move on with the Ka-tet's mission, with the Dark Tower mission. And he feels this as an acute betrayal. He's going to feel guilty about this maybe for the rest of his life. At least right now, he believes that he's going to feel guilty about this for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So for him, this is doing the kind of thing that he still hasn't forgiven Roland for doing. And I think, I mean, I do think that text is making that connection, actually.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think especially at the very end of this chapter where he almost makes the comparison between Roland killing Benny's father and Roland dropping him are equally terrible. I think King is inviting us to make those connections. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think it might not be entirely rational, but to the mind of a young Jake, making his quote unquote betrayal of Benny and Roland's betrayal of him equal in his mind is certainly something that I think feels reasonable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you kill a kid's dad, or if you get the kid's dad exiled, or, you know, like that's the best case scenario almost. Like this is a terrible thing to do to someone. Just, it is. So, yeah.
I really like this little section here, and I want to read it for you. The duster with the commodious pocket in front was hanging on a nail in the tack room. Jake took it, whipped it into something like a fat belt, and cinched it around his middle. Kids in his school had sometimes worn their outer shirts that way on warm days, like those of his room. The memory seemed far away, part of a circus parade that had marched through town, and then left. That life was richer, a voice deep in his mind whispered. This one is truer, whispered another, even deeper. He believed that second voice, but his heart was still heavy with sadness and worry as he led the border pony out through the back of the barn and away from the house. I mean, this is so wonderful, Matt, because it's as Jake is fixing to go on this quest and do this thing that, as we just talked about, is going to feel like a sense of betrayal. He is in this liminal state, right, between childhood and adulthood, between his home as he once knew it and his home now. And this one feels more right to him now. It feels more true, but that other one has a richness to it that he misses. Like back in New York City, Jake will probably not have to be the person making this kind of decision yet, right? Like he could be a child for a little bit longer. Yeah. He could do he could have fun for a little bit longer. Well,
I mean, in a sense, he could have fun for his whole life if he wanted to, right?
Yeah.
Like he could be an artist, right? He could be, he could be anything. I think that's the sense in which just staying in New York City and being a person, you know, being a New Yorker, that's one of the most rich lives imaginable in all of human history. And he's traded it for this kind of grueling mission. But, you know, at least in this moment, he firmly believes that this mission is truer and more important. So
yeah, he believes it. Yeah. And there's something heartbreaking about that is the truth. That he knows that's the truth, because that's always been Jake, right?
Truth, yeah.
It's like that's from the very first moment we met him, at least in not in the Gunslinger itself, but in the Wastelands. That is the truth. Like that refrain has always been with him. Yeah.
Speaking of the Wastelands, or the Gunslinger, like it's fun to think of how much he's grown up since then. I think of him as a much more mature character than like when we first met him in the way station.
Yeah. Another great quote I love here, Matt, that I wanted to talk to you about because it's more Oi. Doesn't matter, he sighed. It's Ka. And this is Jake kind of thinking about what he has to do. Ka, Oi said, then looked up. Moon, Ka, moon, Ka, moon, Ka. Shut up, Jake said, not unkindly. I said that wrong, but he said, shut up, Ka, Oi said amiably. Shut up, Moon. Shut up, Ache. Shut up, Oi. It was the most he'd said in months, and once it was out, he fell silent. It's just, I really love it, right?
Oh, good God, I love Oi so much. It's so great, yeah. But I mean, and I just wanted to point out, like, the connection between the moon and Ka, it's hardly new, right? Like, Wizard and Glass was this whole book about the moon, like, leering over our characters as this, almost acting as a symbol of Ka. You know, as Ka is ruining their lives, the moon is looking down on them. What I'm saying is always very wise because he recognizes this connection between the moon and Ka. And of course, Jake is using the moon in his Ka-related plan. So once again, the moon continues to serve its role as a symbol for Ka and fate and so forth.
Yeah, I love it. And Oi represents our frustration with everything, like the frustration with Ka, frustration with what he has to do, frustration with everything.
Yeah.
Like, there's some frustration here, and he just happily barks it out, and is the most he'd said in months. So like he is being extraordinarily talkative right now.
Yeah.
It's great.
He has a lot of feelings about this.
He does. He's probably nervous too, like you wonder like the Kef bond that's going on between them. Jake Oy is probably just as like stressed out about this whole thing, about what's going to happen, filled with just as much sadness and worry.
Yeah. That's a good point. I tend to forget that Oy has like an inner life, but yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm just reading quotes now, but there's so much good stuff here, Matt. He felt better when he'd taken the Docker's clutch out of the bedroll, cinched it in place, and then added the Ruger. The Ruger made him a different person, one he didn't always like. But here, on the far side of the Y, he was delightful to feel the gun weight against his ribs, and delighted to be that person, that gunslinger. So we're just talking about liminal states, right? And this is kind of, he straps on the gun and walks across the threshold, and becomes the different person, becomes the adult, becomes the gunslinger, and how the weapon is just such an important symbol of this thing.
Yeah, I love the word gun weight. It's like one word, gun weight. Just a great little twist of language King is doing.
Yeah.
I think there's some value in the fact that Jake doesn't necessarily like the part of himself that's a gunslinger. Mm-hmm. It seems like plotting, unimaginative Roland might have never had that thought a single time during his childhood, that like he didn't like some parts of the gunslinger side of himself. Like I mean, as an adult maybe, but I feel like this is one of the things that Jake brings to the Ka-tet and brings to Roland specifically, is this kind of willingness to criticize himself in a certain way. And be reflective in that way.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, I remember back in Wizard and Glass, like when he was in love with Susan, he was very willing to be like, I'm tired of the gunslinger side of me. But that was almost like a childish fancy. He hadn't actually like experienced what it meant to be a gunslinger yet.
Right.
He hadn't killed anyone yet.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. I wonder. I don't know. I'd have to think on that. But I think there will be times that Roland would feel that way, but I think he would push that aside very quickly. Yeah. Whereas Jake just seems to accept it as part of the fact. And it's like, I am not fully into this whole gunslinger thing, but I recognize the need of it right now. And so I will take up that mantle. I will put on that Docker's clutch, and I will assume that role tonight.
Yeah. Like, I feel like Jake is the sort of person who is sort of in an ongoing dialogue with himself about these complex feelings that he has, whereas Roland, like you just said, Roland, if he ever felt that way, then, or if he feels that way occasionally, then he just shoves it aside to get on with the mission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. It also kind of makes me think about last week and our conversation around Susanna, and the fact that she kind of jokingly said, I might just hang up the gun and just use these plates. And there was a shock to Roland with that. And I think it is part of because the gun is such a distinct, important part of this whole equation, right? Like Jake does not assume the role of gunslinger, does not become that gunslinger until he hangs a gun from his belt. And I think so. The idea that Susanna would be willing to turn away from the gun is so significant, like metaphorically. And I wonder if it plays into the battle and the identity issues that are raging inside of her right now, that the book is really not talking about, because she's just burying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. We have little to go on there, but yeah, I like that interpretation.
Cool. So we also see that, like Eddie, Jake hears voices inside his head too. And like Eddie, one of them is Roland. We kind of speculated about this last week, and I just wanted to clear something up, because we got some comments from people, and I don't think either of us ever actually considered that this was just like literal telepathy, that like Roland was like literally speaking in Jake's head, like the person that is Roland. But I do still think it reads to me as something a bit more than just, as you said, this person is so ingrained and internalized in my head that when I am thinking, I hear their voice. I do think there's something magic here. Roland is not literally watching Jake and thinking at him right now, but perhaps Kef and Ka are working together to translate or beam messages to Jake using the voice of his mentor.
Yeah. I mean, Roland hears the voices of his mentors explicitly. Jake hears the voices of his mentors. And I think as we go into this chapter specifically, the book really draws our attention to this more directly than ever, and almost demands that we consider it to be somehow supernatural, just because of it's almost too. It's just too. This isn't the way people actually think, right? Like it just isn't. And so if the book is going to continue doing this and continue drawing attention to it, then I'm gonna have to be open to the idea that it means something.
Sure. Yeah. I like it.
Okay.
So Jake uses Oi and his amazing nose once again to find Slightman the Elder's trail, which leads him to a big building lit up by fluorescent lights. I love, Matt, you talked about at the beginning of the show, but the big spooky man-eating cactus things they call bloom flurries that kind of like reach out for you. Just another otherworldly killing machine here at the end of the world.
Yeah, it's great because at first I thought they were some kind of like robotic defense for the building, and then I realized that they're just flesh-eating cacti. And it was great. And I love how minor it is. It's like, there's cacti that attack and eat people. It's a thing.
Yeah. Well, and I love how we kind of find out after the fact, like, that if Jake had stuck around for a little bit longer, he could have actually been in danger.
Right.
And he wasn't even aware of it. Like, he was a little creeped out by them, and Oi is obviously uncomfortable, but like, he could have actually been in danger there and just didn't know it. And he just kind of walked beyond it fast enough that it never happened.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
So Jake walks up to the building, which we learn is another North Central Positronics location, one of many we've seen throughout this series so far. And this one is called the Dogen. Hey, wait, that's that name that I specifically said last week is not important at all and doesn't mean anything. Weird.
Yeah, weird.
Isn't this book fun, though?
It is.
They found last week, they found a book that was a misprint, and it had Slightman's name on it, and the Dogen. It was like, look at this silly misprint. And then this week we're at the location. It's wild.
It's wild. I mean, I like, it's so interesting how King does these things, but usually it doesn't matter, right? Like it didn't actually help Jake in any way to know in advance that the place he was going to go to was called the Dogen. Like at most, what it does is that when he gets there, actually, no, he didn't even see the book.
No, yeah. This is the same night as Eddie and Roland stuff. So
it's just for us, right? It's just for us to be like, like it's so interesting how I can't even think of any times where it's actually mattered other than just being like a sign,
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they had a fun conversation like the next morning.
Yeah.
Where Jake was like, yeah, so then I went to a place called the Dogen, and Eddie just like fucking throws his hands up in the air and just like walks off for a minute because he just can't take this shit anymore.
Yeah.
But we don't get to see that scene, but we know it happened.
We know it happened.
So Jake gets to the front and he presses the button on the talk box, and it prompts him to enter or say aloud a password. He says 19 at first, but it says no. So then he says 99, and it works. And it makes you wonder, well, is that the one that's going to unlock all Andy's secrets as well? We don't know.
Yeah, worth a try, right?
Yeah. The door swings open and Jake gets inside. It is interesting that Jake almost does this without thinking, right? Like, we don't see a thought process. He says 19, it says, no, you have one more try, and then he just blurts out 99. And this is it. He has one final shot. His entire mission could have been blown in this moment if he gets it wrong. But once again, he just says 99, the random number that he said back when he was introduced to the Calla, the Ka-tet of 99, right? This random thing. And we get to see here from Jake's perspective that he doesn't know what it means, and he doesn't know why he said it when he said it. And we still don't either. But it's what gets him in here now. So, yay.
Yeah, well, that's Ka, baby. Jake is our boy with the touch, so I just figured like he picked up this password from the ether somehow.
Sure.
Or maybe he picked it up from Andy, since apparently the touch can read silicon dipolar minds.
Yeah, if it thinks you can read it.
Yeah.
You can touch it.
Which is a great notion. I hope that comes up more.
Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder, how much of, I know he's been strengthened in the touch since recently, but like how much did he pick up from Blaine?
Mm-hmm.
You don't know.
Yeah, I mean that occurred to me as well. Yeah, I don't know.
So what he finds in this placemat is interesting. It's a large bank of TV monitors in a room. that reminds him of that place that he traveled under Lud, which I think is trying to demonstrate to us that, hey, all these places seem to have been built by the same people, right? Like these all look the same. They're using the same or similar kind of technology, kind of. And on all these monitors is the Calla. All parts of it. We see Took's store, we see some of the farms, and we see Callahan's church. In fact, inside the rectory of Callahan's church. And this is really interesting because while the Dogan appears ancient and run down, it's clear that the cameras and the sound equipment are still being placed and still being used, and even in new places, right? Because Pear's church is only something that's 5 years old or something. So like this technology is still actively being used, and the Calla is still being actively spied upon.
Yeah, it definitely implies that a lot of effort and time and energy and manpower are, ongoingly being poured into this child stealing operation. Because, like you said, that the wolves, they come like once a generation, right? So, so somebody has still been setting up cameras during this entire interval, preparing for their coming for years. And you have to wonder, I mean, we know that Slightman the Elder is doing this, but you wonder maybe others are involved. I don't know. It seems like a lot of work for one person, I guess, is what I'm thinking at this point.
Yeah. I mean, we just don't know. Yeah. But it does seem like this is kind of our first hint that this is an ongoing operation, and like basically every kind of weird combination of technology we've seen in Midworld so far has been ancient, has been old, and has been basically fallen out of use. Like even Lud was a place that was, hundreds of years past its prime and just kind of sitting there dying. But this is ongoing, active. It's still old, but it's still being used.
Yep.
And that is a change.
Yeah.
So suddenly Jake sees on the cameras that Slightman and Andy are approaching the Dogan. He almost faints out of sheer panic, but is once again Roland's voice that pulls him back from the brink. This time, though, it's not encouragement, but a kind of admonishment here. He says, "Would you be so cowardly then?" Roland asked inside his head. "But why would they kill such a coward as you? Why would they not just send you west with the broken ones who have forgotten the faces of their fathers?" It works on him. I mean, like, as you said, he's about to faint. He's about to pass out from panic. And this works and kind of pulls him back. But I wonder if that kind of technique would have worked on someone else. Like Eddie, for instance. I'm not so sure that kind of just raking him over the coals for his cowardice would have been something that would have like straightened out Eddie. I think Eddie would have pushed back against it. I think this is something that is almost specifically tailored to Jake, because Jake is so intent on, impressing Roland and not letting Roland down, that kind of mean football coach technique would work on him really, really well.
Yeah, right. I think they're in very different places in their lives, and Jake has not made the sorts of mistakes that Eddie has made. So yeah, I think you're right. It's interesting. It's like, if Eddie were in this situation, would the voice have done that? Like
I don't think so.
Like that's the thing, is like, I feel like this is just in a sense, it's the individual's conscience wearing a different aspect. I mean, it's entirely possible that telepathy and Kef are wound up in that somehow, but like it seems to me that it's a part of Jake that's speaking in Roland's voice, and Eddie might have a slightly different part.
Sure.
Yeah. I was thinking about being roughly 19, ironically, and for the first time understanding the concept of a role model, because obviously, I had heard the term role model 1,000 times by the time I was that age, but I didn't really get it until I was about that age, because I realized that the way human beings organize our thoughts about ourselves and our plans about our lives and our self-concept is by looking to people that we admire in various ways, and just copying and just ripping off what we like and just trying to do it that way. And I think the consequence of having role models is that you sort of end up with something very much like voices in your head. You have these connections to your major role models. And I don't literally have voices in my head, but I do have sort of like personas or facets associated with different role models that I've had through my life that I can always tap into.
Sure.
So this is something that was occurring to me as I was thinking about this concept of like the voices that are in people's heads in this story.
Sure. I like that a lot. I wonder, you just said like you find a person that you respect and that you look up to, and then you kind of declare them your role model, and then you model your behavior off of them. But like in this instance, Jake didn't choose Roland. Jake didn't like decide, hey, I really like this guy and I want to be like this guy. It was kind of like Ka or Destiny or whatever you want to call it thrust that upon him. And so it kind of maybe that is why we're seeing, as you described it, like this kind of internal, not war, but like where he's recognizing that he doesn't like this side of him because he's a role model that he didn't choose. He's a role model that he had chosen for him. And so there's a little bit of conflict between his internal personality, who he is as a person, and who the person he's trying to model himself after is.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think that's one of the kind of unending struggles of having role models is there's no perfect role model. And so you may find someone that you really admire, and then you actually may struggle when you realize that there are aspects of who they are that you don't want to copy. And then you have to figure out like, well, what does it mean for me to want to be like this person, except not in this way? Like, can I actually do that? Is it possible to kind of carve around this particular flaw in their personality, or maybe that's a flaw that runs through their whole being, and maybe they're not a good role model. Actually, it's something that I've struggled with, honestly, with some role models that I've had where, I've really, really admired them for one particular kind of aspect of who they were, and eventually kind of had to be like, I think it may be more bad than good to have this person as a role model,
Yeah, sure. I get that. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a powerful concept. It's something we do automatically, but if you realize that it's happening, you can kind of help guide it. And I don't know that that's what King is doing with this concept, but it really reminds me very much of the concept of role models when King has the characters speak in each other's heads and in this way.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting, and I don't want to take too much more time on this tangent that we're going on, but I've never really like consciously like said, I need a role model. I need someone to look up to. I certainly have had people in different areas of my life where I look at someone and I say, that's the kind of film critic I want to be. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of husband I want to be. And that kind of things. But I don't think I've ever really framed it in my way as like, this is a person who I'm going to adapt my behavior around. But I do still think that exists, because I don't know if you asked Jake, like, who is your role model, if he would go Roland, mm-hmm. right? I don't think he would be as conscious of it, but I do 100% agree that is what is happening. And if King is not intentionally doing it, I still think there's something certainly there worth talking about. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I think we're basically on the same page. I think that it's cool to see how different people see things differently, but I think we all do have the concept of role models. We just don't necessarily employ it the same way or think about it the same way. Right.
Yeah. 100%. So Jake decides to hide in the closet as the robot and the traitor walk into the Dogan, which is like a joke. It's some sort of joke. I haven't worked it out yet. And we get this wonderful quote here. Eddie said Andy reminded him of a robot named C-3PO in Star Wars, a movie to which Jake had been looking forward. He had missed it by less than a month. So this is the greatest tragedy of everything that's happened, Matt. Jake never got to see Star Wars. How awful.
I was genuinely upset to read this. And of course, King couldn't possibly have any other reason for mentioning Star Wars at this point in the story, I'm sure.
What would it be? What would it be?
I can't think of anything. Speaking of Star Wars, I wanted to say that I picture Andy as looking like K2SO, the droid from Rogue One, because I'm pretty sure Andy's supposed to be like tall and has really long limbs.
Yeah, he is. I think in this chapter, it points out like how it almost looks comical to see Andy and Slightman walking down the road because the robot is so much taller than the man. Yeah.
And K2SO is like a terrifying murder droid, so that's a cool image. And also he has like glowing eyes, which makes me like I don't know if I'm serious about this, but I wonder if K2SO is designed to look like Andy, the android.
I don't know. I don't know.
Probably not, honestly, but maybe.
Are his eyes blue?
No, I don't remember. I don't think so. I don't think they
are. So we learn finally the truth of what Slightman did, something we've already suspected, but we get to see it right in front of us now. He betrayed his people for his boy. Ben might be alone now, but he was a twin, and the wolves might take the only living twin just as soon as they take one of the two, right? But yeah, he got some freebies along the way, and I love this quote. Glasses so I can see better to betray the people I have known all my life. A music machine so I won't have to hear the consciousness you prat about so easily and can get to sleep at night. I'm curious, Matt, what your feelings on Ben Slightman are here, Matt. He clearly is carrying the guilt for the choices that he's made here, but it is not stopping him from making them.
Yeah, again, it's the sort of character where you have a horrible suspicion that you would totally be this guy if you were put in this situation. But you'd like to hope that you wouldn't be. I find it pretty impossible to cast moral judgments on people who are put in this awful situation of having to choose between protecting their kids and, you know, sacrificing other people, basically. And maybe that... Maybe that my failure to condemn him is itself cowardly. I don't know. Morality is hard.
It is. I mean, I do think there's something to kind of frame this in a different way. Everyone in the Calla is passively, like making a passive choice to allow things to go on to protect, you know, their child, like, or one of their children, right?
Yeah.
Like they're choosing not to act in order to protect a kid. The difference is Ben is choosing to actively act, like to make a choice, to actively do something to protect his kid. And like it is so much easier to damn the man that is actively doing something and wave off everyone else in town who have over years and years and years just chosen to sit back and do nothing. And I think it's very easy when he's talking about the freebies he gets, like, you know, it's like Judas getting the pieces of silver. It's just like it almost just twists the knife a little bit and sets his guilt aflare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, he's a traitor. 100% he's betrayed everyone he cares about, but it is for the sake of his own kid. And I think he is conflicted about it, and you can tell. And there's something inherently human about that. So I think it is too easy to just say, damn him, and then turn the other way. Like, I do think something that King has done throughout this entire book has been try to really draw out and demonstrate the people of the Calla as these complex people, even the ones choosing to sit on the sidelines, even the ones choosing to resist any hope of a future without the wolves. Like, that we're annoyed by them, we don't like them, and we'd call them the bad guys, but we still understand the choices they're making. And I think they do the same with Ben Slightman here. Yeah.
I don't think King is interested in just kind of blithely condemning anyone. I mean, I think if we take Roland as the moral center, which is already a dubious proposition, then I think we're supposed to judge these characters pretty harshly. But also he's giving us plenty of a perspective to show how, hey, it's hard, it's complicated. And I really think, like, unfortunately, I've said this before, horrible situations that look sort of like this have happened throughout human history. And the usual thing that happens is when the bad guys come door to door and take your neighbors' kids and go genocide them because they're have slightly the wrong ethnic background or whatever. Usually everybody just shuts their door until that's over. Mm-hmm. They don't stand up for their neighbor usually, and that's horrible. But it says something about who we are, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what the scene was like, you know, the first time Ben Slightman was approached about this. We don't get to see it, but you kind of wonder if it was Andy that that whoever's in charge here like looks out across the town and says, who is the one that is most susceptible to manipulation? Who is the one that we can really squeeze to turn them to our side? And what kind of pressure they put on him to do this.
Well, and Andy's what, like 1,000 years old or something? Like he's probably knows exactly, like as soon as he finds a parent who has a child, who is the one survivor of twins, then he's like, oh, okay, I can put pressure on them because I've done this before, maybe. Yeah.
Not to, and I want to be clear here that I don't think we're trying to excuse any of his actions here. He is basically like has joined the bad guys to point out all the weaknesses of our heroes. Like that's bad. Right. It's totally bad.
Yes. And I think there's definitely a difference between shutting your door when the wolves come by and giving the wolves a map to where the kids are.
Yeah.
So
yes. And putting marks on the other people's doors. That's definitely very different. And it is despicable in a way. But yeah, I mean, I do think King, the end of this chapter and the beginning of the next one has Jake begging Roland to spare this man's life. And so I do think like if we were supposed to just write him off as evil, like we wouldn't have those things happening.
Yeah.
But more importantly than that, we get to see Andy when he puts his act down. So Ben Slightman, a bad guy, but maybe not evil. Andy the robot, on the other hand, I'll allow it from the rest of them, Andy said, and now his voice had changed. Jake once more thought of Blaine, and once more his dismay grew. What if T and Jaffords heard this voice? What if Von Eisenhart heard it? Overholser, the rest of the folken? They heap contumely on my head like hot coals, and never do I raise a word of protest, let alone a hand. Go here, Andy. Go there, Andy. Stop your foolish singing, Andy. Stuff your prattle. Don't tell us the future because we don't want to hear it. So I don't. Except of the wolves, because they'd hear what makes them sad, and I'd tell them yes I would. To me each tear's a drop of gold. You're no but a stupid pile of lights and wires, they say. Tell us the weather, sing the babby to sleep, get the hell out of here. And I allow it, foolish Andy I am, every child's toy, and always fair game for a tongue-whipping. But I won't take a tongue-whipping from you, sigh. It's just chilling and wonderful, and I love the Blaine comparison because it's like King is inviting us to feel the same way about Andy as we have him, and I love that this is kind of like everything our characters have been feeling about Andy up until this point is just being vindicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this side of Andy is delightful. I'm really digging King's evil robots, in the story. I'm finding that Andy, though, has a real pathos that Blaine didn't, because like when you think about it, both Blaine and Andy are both these unfortunate, tragic creatures. They were made to be servants, even to be slaves, perhaps. That they were made to serve functions. They were also made to be immortal and superhuman. And the world that they were made to serve in has now collapsed. So we don't like either of them. They're both bad, but we can at least kind of imagine feeling sorry for Andy, at least in this moment where we kind of realize his, like the existential terror of his existence. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if I was even being asked to feel that way about him in this moment, but I felt more for him than I ever felt for Blaine, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, he's a complicated character. I think what we can kind of start doing, and it's, I don't want to conclude on this yet, but just to kind of put it out there, we can start to draw a picture of what this world's view of technology is, and view of this kind of advanced technology, and we've had these two things that were created a long time ago, and now it seems they serve nothing but bad. I mean, Blaine is this AI driven mad that is just acting horribly. Andy, we don't know why he's doing this, but we do kind of see he gets a sadistic kind of enjoyment out of it. And whether or not that's programmed into him or is just a change of his artificial intelligence as time went on, I don't know. But their sadness, each tear's a drop of gold, right? Yeah. And then we'll see later that he's like cackling maniacally just with his eyes at the confusion of Ben when he's giving his report. Like there is some true maliciousness here. He is enjoying this.
Yeah. Sure. I agree with all of that. I guess the only question remaining in my mind is like, is Andy insane because he's been driven insane by like thousands of years of being treated like garbage, or is it just like, no, like what we're saying is that when these machines break down, they become monstrous, and that's just the nature of playing God? Like, is this a don't play God story, or is this a don't treat your superhuman AIs like garbage story?
I don't know.
The story will reveal itself at some point, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Andy and Slightman connect via modem to some place called Algul Ciento and a man named Finley Otego. Algul Ciento is a fun name, Matt. We get a little bit more of the Spanish kind of midworld flavor that's perfect for a Western tale that King is telling us. But the thing about this word is it doesn't actually like mean anything. Like Ciento is a first person verb that means I feel, and Algul is like, I mean, it's like technically nothing. It's not a Spanish word. It could be some kind of slang that I don't know, but like I took several years of Spanish and that's not a word, I don't think. So it's just one of those things that like I wanted to try to draw a deeper meaning out of this place, but we can't, at least not yet.
Yeah, I didn't have anything extra for you. I assumed it was a Spanish phrase until I just heard you say it out loud. And then I realized it just rings the same sort of space of sound as like Minas Morgul or Dol Guldur, which are two of Sauron's evil strongholds, right? It's got those specific sounds that Tolkien liked to use to
the ghoul.
Yeah, the this is an evil thing syllable.
Yeah. So you're saying it's like the fantasy Western version of Minas Morgul.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, and we basically know this place is a bad place. So
sure, yeah. And we don't really know who Finley Otego is, but he's the guy with a fun name.
Cool.
I like his name. I like Finley Otego. It's fun. I like it.
Yeah.
So we see Slightman make his report to Finley. He tells him everything he saw, including the parts that he clearly doesn't understand, like what kind of stuff Roland was carrying up in his bag to the unfound door. And my favorite part of all this is, as we kind of hinted before, is Andy's laughing at him. In the dusty darkness of the closet, Jake could suddenly see Andy watching Slightman make his report. Andy's blue electric eyes were flashing. Slightman didn't know. No one in the Calla knew. But the rapid flashing was the way DNF 44821-V-63 expressed humor. He was, in fact, laughing at Slightman. Because he knows better, Jake thought. Because he knows what's really in the bag. Bet a box of cookies, he does. So this is really interesting, Matt, because it's clear that Andy knows what's going on. Andy knows what's in the bag, but he doesn't like interrupt the report or correct Slightman's inaccuracy. He just kind of lets him go on with his wrongness, laughing at him behind his back. So either Finley or whoever else is at Algul Ciento already knows this as well, or Andy is withholding information from them, or Andy, like we see Andy give his own report a little bit later and it's literally just like data transfer modem noises. So he's like slipping them the correct information behind Slightman's back. We don't know, but it just seems weird that like he's keeping secrets from his group of conspirators.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe he has his own agenda. Maybe he literally just enjoys fucking with people.
Yeah, could be.
I mean, he basically just said he likes making the wolves cry, right? Which is a bit of a surprising thing to say if he's like an agent of the wolves. It's like he's just messing with everybody. This is maybe how he gets his kicks. I
think he was saying he makes the people cry about the wolves.
Is that it? Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. He says in a weird way, I don't accept of the wolves because they'd heard what makes them sad.
Okay.
So I don't tell them about anything except of the wolves.
I just completely misunderstood that.
It's okay. It's the crazy Calla speech.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for clearing that up. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love this whole bit. Anytime you have a character who has just been kind of in the background and then you realize that like they've been more intelligent and motivated and conniving than you realize, it always freaks you out. Like you always, I don't know, that's one of my favorite things that stories do is kind of pull pull a fast one on you where suddenly this character jumps out of the background and you realize that you should be afraid of them.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder how many earlier scenes in the story were Andy's eyes flashing, and like, did King prime us on this? Are there scenes? Could we go back and read about Andy's eyes flashing?
Probably. I would guess so, but I didn't check.
This is a detail that I had completely forgotten about, so I didn't get to do the fun thing where I was paying attention to it the whole time. So I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe in our final episode on the book, I'll take the time and go look through and see that and report back.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. We'll just talk about it the next time we go through the whole series on a podcast.
Yeah. Jesus. So we see here that Slightman reports that their plan that they still are going to take the kids into one of the caves, and we kind of see here that Roland's deception has worked a little bit and is still working. Slightman says putting them in such a place is a mistake, but he don't know it. He's dangerous, but grown old in his thinking. Probably such a strategy has worked for him before, which is true. And I love that we get Jake's commentary on it. I was like, yep, I Bolt Canyon, but they're underestimating Roland Deschain again, Matt. And you just don't do that.
It's great.
And I like we'll see later in the final chapter of this week's reading how you can almost imagine Jake reporting this exact line that was said to Roland, because when Roland is like weaving his bullshit to Ben Slightman, he says, oh yeah, and then we're gonna like lay down here, and I did it before and it worked great then. And he's like tapping into this feeling that Slightman has right here, where he's like, he's probably doing something because it worked before.
Yeah.
He's like trying to line up directly with the man's thinking to continue the underestimation of him.
Yeah, make him feel maximally comfortable and like he has the advantage over Roland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the two end up leaving, and Jake sneaks out, and then he gets back to the pallet with Benny. And we kind of see here that like he's so torn. We talked about this at the very beginning of the chapter. He's so torn, and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to feel about this. He knows that this news will destroy young Benny, and knowing that the news came from his best friend will only destroy him further. And that's when we get this excellent line. Suppose Roland kills him. How will Benny look at you then? Once, in another life, Roland had promised to take care of Jake Chambers and then let him drop into the darkness. Jake had thought there could be no worse betrayal than that. Now he wasn't so sure. No, not so sure at all. These unhappy thoughts kept him awake for a long time. Finally, half an hour or so before the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, he fell into a thin and troubled sleep. Oh man, what a great end to a chapter.
Yeah, I mean, I think that earlier in this book, I guess that this book might bring us further down this path of Jake's loss of innocence. And now he's on his way toward, doing this thing that he's probably going to regret forever. I think part of losing innocence is accumulating these burdens of regret. And it makes you sad. I'm belatedly starting to wonder, like, where does Jake's journey go? Like, is this a tragedy or a what's a word for thing that is not a tragedy but is not a comedy, because it's definitely not a comedy. Like what I'm saying is, will Jake's journey destroy him? Will it make him into kind of a cruel kind of
gunslinger?
Yeah. Basically, I was gonna say that, and then I was like, well, is that what I want to say? Yeah, basically, like, but you can also imagine it making him stronger, making him a full adult who is sort of like the gunslinger as you can imagine that a gunslinger could be. Roland at his best or Roland at his worst, maybe.
Yeah, I like that.
And I don't know. I mean, obviously you do, but like it's only occurring to me now to kind of wonder, to kind of specifically ask the question, what is in store for Jake? Where does his path go?
Yeah, what I particularly like about it is, in these moments, he's not wrestling with the decision about whether to like tell Roland about this. Like he already seems like he's made up his mind that he has to tell the Ka-tet. And as we'll see next chapter, like when we join up with everyone, he has already told them. He's told them everything. And so I like that, like right now he's not wrestling with the choice of what to do. He's wrestling with how to handle the consequences of it, because he knows there's going to be consequences and he knows what he has to do. It's like he strapped on that gun and the decision was made for him. He was doing gunslinger work. He can't keep this to himself anymore. And part of him is dealing with that adult decision he made. And it's really rough. It's really rough. And that line, like, Jake had thought there could be no worse betrayal than that. Now he wasn't so sure, not so sure at all. That he sees this, as we talked about at the very beginning of the chapter, he sees this as almost worse than what Roland did to him now. And that's part of growing up too, is you see something that as a kid is like, this is the worst thing that someone could ever do to someone. And then as you grow up, you're like, oh no, look, here's this choice that I've made now. And that's worse. That's worse what I've done. Great.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I guess that's what I'm like at this moment. I was like, well, this is just tragic.
Yeah.
That's what prompted me to wonder, well, where are we going from here? Because it's sad. It's he's not gonna do this and then be like, I made the right choice. He's gonna feel terrible regret, even if the best possible outcome occurs, really, So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Chapter 4, The Pied Piper. Chapter 4 begins with our Ka-tet kind of, for lack of a better word, reforming. Roland declares them Ka-tet again in much the same way that he did the first time he used it as the word as friends, kind of like this almost a ritual that's like reestablishing the Ka-tet. And this time, of course, Callahan is included in that, and I just think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. I don't know if I believe Roland, but let's go on.
But we learned that Jake has told everyone everything he saw. No more secrets. Ka-tet once again. It's great. And then we do this wonderful little thing here where he held out his hands. Jake took one, Susanna the other. In a moment, all five were joined in a little circle, hand in hand. Do we see each other? See you very well, Jake said. Very well, Roland, said Eddie. Clear as day, Shug, Susanna agreed, smiling. Oi, who was sniffing in the grass nearby, said nothing, but he did look around and tip a wink. Pair? Roland asked. I see and hear you very well, Callahan agreed with a small smile, and I'm glad to be included. So far, at least. Whew! Problem solved. Everything is fine now. They held hands, they ka-tetted. It's all good. Oi winked. It's all
good. And he said no more lies. And so that means he's going to tell him about the dry twist immediately, right?
Yeah.
Hello, is this thing on? No? Okay. Yeah.
Oh, no, he didn't do that.
He didn't
do that. Yeah.
And
Susanna's still hiding stuff. Yeah. And then at the end of this chapter, he finds a really important book and is just like, I don't have to tell him about this yet.
Right. Yeah. Right. The book that he can't read, but they can, that he doesn't mention. Yeah.
Please give this to them so they could read it right away. Yeah. Not yet. I wonder if that's going to blow up in his face. I really do like this part where like Callahan has joined the Ka-tet and he's kind of like dealing with everything that was just told him, and he says to Eddie, you didn't mean it about killing the wives and children, of course. That was just a bluff. And Eddie's response to this is perfect. Sure, father. Sure.
Yeah, he's so annoyed. It's a really great moment. I mean, he doesn't really say sure, father. He says basically don't ask if you don't want to know the answer.
He says let's just say I was bluffing and then move on.
Right.
We don't have time for this shit.
Yeah, right. I mean, which it kind of leaves us like I mean, I can't, it's hard for me to imagine Eddie killing children. But like I think in that moment he meant it, which is all that matters.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think you make a guy like just Antolini. I think you make a guy like that believe you only by meaning it. I really do. And so I do think he meant it. Yeah. And it's interesting that like Callahan's role has been for the last couple of weeks to kind of push up against their actions in a very obviously very like traditionally, Christian moralistic kind of way, right? The first with the abortion, and then here again with the threatening to kill, and they have kind of just pushed him off, but like he is serving that role, like he's trying to check them.
Yeah.
and check their behavior.
It's a good point, because like they're basically inviting this guy into their Ka-tet and saying like, when we leave, you're going to come with us. And it's like, okay, but he's a priest. Mm-hmm. He has very specific beliefs about morality and right and wrong that I don't think are going to jive with Roland's gunslinger morality of like Bushido, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I think last week's like specifically said with the idea of absolution that it doesn't jive, right? Like that just the totally different. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. We'll see.
No problems at all.
We'll see how that evolves.
Yeah. So they make their plans. Callahan is told he's going to go back to New York City. They've got to pick up the zip code from the vacant lot, and he's the one that is going to do it. And then he'll have to go back a little bit later to head to wherever they ended up going to talk to Tower and Deep Now and get the sale done. This is a very important part because they need that vacant lot. And then the conversation shifts over to Ben Slightman, the traitor, and Jake finally speaks up. Don't kill him. This time his voice was hoarse and wavering and close to tears. Don't kill Benny's da, please. Eddie reached out and cupped the nape of the boy's neck gently. Jake, Benny Slightman's dad is willing to send 100 kids off into the thunderclap with the wolves just to spare his own. And you know how they'd come back. Yeah, but in his eyes, he doesn't have any choice because... His choice could have been to stand with us, Roland said. His voice was dull and dreadful, almost dead. There's a lot to love there, Matt. Like, I think we see like it is Jake Chambers. Like, you know, his voice is wavering and close to tears. He's speaking up here, but he is like not quite a gunslinger yet. Still a boy for a little bit longer, and as a child, he sees this so much more innocently and less like I'm not sure how to put it, but like everyone else is just like, look at the calculus, Jake. Like, obviously, like, this is a bad man, and we've got to, if he stands in our way, we've got to take him out. And here Jake is asking for mercy.
I feel like this is one of the ways in which they are not really operating as a Ka-tet right now, because this is what Jake is bringing to the Ka-tet. He's bringing them his earnest plea that you don't kill this guy. And they're basically just, like you said, they're calculating, they're brushing him off with a you know, a very bloodless kind of moral argument, and it doesn't make Jake feel better at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, the way I see this going is like they're gonna kill Slightman the Elder. It's gonna have turned out to be a terrible choice for some reason, and they should have listened to Jake. And they're going to say, well, we couldn't have predicted this. And the point is going to be, yeah, you couldn't have predicted it, but you should have just listened to Jake. And that's the point of having a Ka-tet with members who have different strengths and different qualities. And when one of them begs for mercy for someone, listen to them. That's where I think this is going anyway. Maybe I'm totally wrong.
I mean, Roland does say that if they can spare him, they will, which is very kind of cold comfort. And he also says that if it's possible, they can get out of this without Benny learning that it was Jake who supplied the information, which is like, in a weird, both completely rational and also like horrible kind of way, that really makes Jake feel better. Because it's like, his dad could still die and things could still be bad, and Benny's life could be ruined forever, but he doesn't know it came from me, so whew. Yeah. But I mean, that's totally, like, I totally understand why you would feel relief at that, like 100%.
Well, it's the sort of thing where you'd feel relief and then you'd feel terrible about feeling relief about it, so.
Sure. I also like how many times, like, you know, sometimes you and I are too hard on Roland, and I will freely admit that. I think that's kind of part of sitting with these books for as long as they are and analyzing them as close as they are, but sometimes you just look at the words that King uses to describe Roland and how often the words are harsh, unwavering, cruel. I mean, here we have dull. His voice was dull and dreadful and almost dead. How often his eyes are described as cold and dead and like lifeless in some ways. Like, just like, it's fascinating the negative adjectives that are used to describe our protagonist and hero.
Yeah. Sure. I think this book, among all of the quote unquote fantasy sagas that I've read, is the one where I think it's the most excusable for us to be hard on the character, because we've got these bits where you've got sort of neutral third parties being like, I don't know who's worse, Roland or, some other horrible monster.
Who are you?
I was reaching for Jonas. Okay, but
Jonas.
The name escaped me. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. His voice was dull and dreadful, almost dead. Oh, yeah. So good.
Yeah.
So one interesting thing here now is that all the time that the Ka-tet was having this conversation, Susanna has been like noticing a group of singing children, and she couldn't see them. She's just been hearing them, and because they've been cut off from view, but like slowly walking their way. And it's about this point that they turn round the corner and the Ka-tet sees them. And what this is all the twins in town dancing and singing and led by Andy the messenger robot, many other functions.
Many other functions is another one of those great Stephen King choruses, I'll call them, that I've really come to love, where he's taken this innocuous phrase or word or whatever it is and repeated it in a certain creepy context. And now for the rest of my life, I'm going to be like picking up food processors and looking ominously at people saying food processor, many other functions. Just because like that's what I just love these. I love this thing that he does where it's like he primes you until you absorb it,
Yeah, I mean it's both hilarious because like it's almost signaling exactly what's going on with Andy in that he's the one betraying them all.
Yeah.
But at the same time it's not, because as is pointed out to us in these chapters, Messenger is exactly what he's doing. He's relaying messages, just not to the ones you thought they were. So it's both literally true that his other functions were right there, and it's clear that it was in front of you all the time. It's just it's very funny. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
So but this whole scene is horrifying. Like Eddie calls Andy the Pied Piper here, giving us our chapter title, and this is Andy the robot leading our kids down the road, basically like proverbially leading them to their death, while they sing a song about Kamala, about, both growing of rice and about sex, about the creating and growing of children. And it's just so delightfully horrific. And I think King really excels at this kind of scene that like something in any other context would perhaps be seen as this like this fun parade. Like maybe like 3 chapters ago we would have looked at this, or 4 chapters ago or whatever, we looked at this and be like, oh, this is like delightful. And now to both us, the reader, and the characters itself, it's just monstrous. It's just absolutely monstrous.
Absolutely. It's a moment of creepiness that's really striking. I love it.
And I mean, like a bit later in our final chapter, like Roland basically says that you folks are a crop to these people. And and so now we kind of are starting to understand why this song, this Kamala is like this linkage of rice planting and rice growing and rice harvesting and sex, because like it's an important part of cultural touchstone that y'all gotta fuck and make babies, because we need to harvest your babies for whatever, we don't know. It just kind of makes this, like, I just remember, like, you see the Kamala and when Roland dances it's this like beautiful moment, and now it's kind of like this is it's a different song. It's not the same song that these kids are singing, but it's horrifying.
Yeah, it's sort of a dark, corrupted pall over the whole idea. I remember how you referred to this as like a fertile crescent, and of course, back at that part of the story, I was just thinking about it in terms of being a fertile crescent of land, but it's also one of the only places in the world that we know of where there's just like people breeding happily and continuing generation after generation, and not, devolving or like, their society falling apart. So it's a fertile crescent of humans too. The human crop is fertile here.
Yeah, definitely. So one other thing the horror of this site does is it triggers something in Susanna, and she feels the first little twinge of a headache above her left eye, but she keeps this a secret. So much for honesty. Or I wrote honesty. I thought, is that something? Is that something?
The more times you say it, the more it becomes something. Is what I've learned from Stephen King.
Well, there we go.
There you go.
Honesty.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the many hints that they're quote unquote repaired, all better now. Ka-tet is bullshit.
Yep. Unfortunate.
Yeah.
So the group breaks up for their various jobs. But before they go, Roland kind of tells everyone not to believe anything he says from this point forward. Everything he says to everyone else will be lies meant to mislead the Falcon. And then we get our quote from the beginning of the book. This is one of the 3 quotes we read at the very beginning of the book. It says, "He gave them a smile. Above it, his faded blue eyes were as hard as rocks. My dad and Cuthbert's dad used to have a rule between them. First the smiles, then the lies, last comes gunfire." It's such what, like, we kind of estimated what that meant back at the beginning of the book, but here we see it as like, first you politic and then you just flat out lie to him, and then after all that, the fight comes.
Yeah. I love the setup of this fight, by the way. It's just the way it's been framed as like we're spending so many weeks and weeks setting this up, and in the end it's going to be, maybe a few minutes of violence. And
sure.
It's I don't know why I like that exactly. It just feels like the opposite of a lot of stories where it's like we're set up for this big epic battle that's going to just go on, and it's like no.
Yeah.
That's like violence usually happens all at once and then is over. That's
yeah.
And
I mean, in the stories that this is based off of, in Seven Samurai and Magnificent Seven, these final battles that we've been leading up to in the whole movie are a good chunk of the third act of the movie.
Yeah.
But we, as you said at the beginning of the episode, we're almost done here. So yeah, it seems like this is going to be very quick. And I think Roland even kind of hints at that when he says, like, when it comes time for the shooting, it's over before you can even believe it.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's just the way it works. Yeah. Well, we'll find out next week, won't we?
Yep.
So we cut over to Callahan standing in front of the unfound door, and we see once again that Roland is the one who's going to hold it open for him. And given how much that messed up Roland last time and possibly like super accelerated his dry twist, it's a bit of a problem, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, he's been sacrificing himself a lot in this way. And I think the biggest problem, again, is that he's hiding it from the Tet.
Right.
It also seems relevant that like he's going to have to be, physically competent for the big shooting thing that's going to happen. And
right. Like you can imagine in another world where Roland had said, all right, folks, here's the thing. I have the dry twist, and every time I go up to that door, it gets worse. And so they would go, hey, why don't I take the father up there this time? Right. And you rest. Yeah. But that's not an option because no one even know. I mean, they knew that it got to him. Like Eddie knows that it was hard on him, but not any specific permanent lasting damage beyond that.
Right. I mean, not that it could basically make him useless in the fight that's about to happen potentially.
Yeah. Which, considering how much Roland was willing to risk Susanna's well-being to ensure that she was in fighting shape, he doesn't seem to have the same level of concern for himself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a quality of his, is that he disregards himself. I mean, I think that Roland does have a bit of a death wish going on.
Yeah,
I don't know if I've ever said that in those words. And now that I've said it, I kind of want to analyze whether I believe it. But I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, let's think about that. I mean, I think this book might reinforce that more than any of the other ones, simply because we see him in this final charge in Jericho Hill,
exactly.
Where he was totally prepared to die, and then for some reason that we don't understand, didn't.
Yeah, and he almost wishes that he had.
Yeah. So Callahan focuses on 1977 and this really, really great brisket he had at good old Choo Choo Mama's once. I don't want to read this out loud because it'll make me hungry, even though it's 11 o'clock at night. I shouldn't be eating brisket. But he does end up back in 1977. It's the next day, and he quickly finds out that the Manhattan Restaurant of the Mind has burned to the ground. At least Tower convinced them to get all those rare books out of the store in time, because they won't matter at all to the story, right, Matt?
Just some books.
Yeah, totally. Not to go completely off on a tangent here on this show that all we do is completely go off on tangents, but I have to say, I just really love this elderly shoeshine boy that Callahan talks to. Like, this is one of those one-off King characters that I just absolutely love. I mean, like, listen to this characterization. The elderly shine boy gave Callahan a cynical look. "Oh, please," it said. He cocked a polished, smeared thumb at the smoldering ruin. "You see that yellow tape? You think they put yellow tape that says police investigation around a place that spontaneously combustulated? No way, my friend. No way, Jose. Cal Tower was in hock to the bad boys, up to his eyebrows. Everyone on the block knew it. The shine boy waggled his own eyebrows, which were lush and white and tangled. I hate to think about his loss. He had some very valuable books in the back there. Very valuable." I love this guy.
Yeah, I genuinely love the elderly shoeshine boy who really feels bad for Cal Tower. He's probably going to turn out to be like a time traveling Sheb or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but he could, but he also could just be a one-off character that we never see again. And yet King takes the time to characterize him in a way that, like, a random person on the street that just has to feed exposition to our character isn't necessary to do, but he has so much flavor, and I love combustulated. I don't even know if in the audiobook that translated in a way that's so enjoyable.
I mean, you couldn't tell that it was intentionally misspelled necessarily, but yeah, I mean, combustulated is yeah.
It's so great.
Yeah.
I love it. I love Shoeshine Guy.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I love that, like, he's still called Shoeshine Boy, even though he's an old man.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's great.
Yeah, that's the best part of it. Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, Matt, let's talk about some songs again.
Okay.
As Callahan walks by Tower of Power Records, he hears the song "The Pied Piper" by Crispian St. Peter's. Damn it, Stephen King. So this is 1977. And apparently in 1977, it's just totally normal for a store to be blasting out a random song from what is basically a one-hit wonder released 11 years earlier.
Uh-huh.
It's just so transparently fucking 19 bullshit here. Like the Pied Piper is playing. I listened to the song like 10 times as I was doing the notes. It is like just a quintessential nonsense. Like, it's catchy, but also how did the song catch on? Yeah,
it's like it's like them making fun of Bob Dylan in the Dewey Cox movie. Yeah, no, I never heard that song before, by the way. So it's like, if it's a cultural touchstone, it's not one that was relevant any time during my life, for sure.
I mean, Crispian St. Peter's, like, this song got to number 4 on the top, the charts, right? It was never a number 1. It got to number 4, which is not, I don't want to, that's pretty good. And he had one other song that got to like number 6. And so, like, it's just obscure.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure, like, my parents probably remember the song, probably, but it's not anything.
So, I mean, just like in my life of writing things, like I've totally done this where, like, I'll be on a kick of listening to some particular album, and there'll just be one song on that track that I just fall in love with, and I'll find some way to work a reference into the story. I did this probably like 10 or 15 years ago, like well before I ever heard of this story. So I don't know. There's just an impulse. I think you feel like you're borrowing kind of the power and the mood of that song. And if your reader happens to know the song, then they'll think about the mood of that song when they get to that point. That's the rationale for why I did it. And I think that's the rationale for why King is doing it.
Sure. I mean, at 1:00 in the morning, as I was working on these notes and listening to my 5th time through this fucking song, it takes on an ominousness to it. Like, when you put it in context of like what's happening in the story right now, when you line this song up to Andy's like parade from a little bit before, it gets spooky. And I don't know if that's like the late night or the repetition or just my brain fucking with me, but it happens. And I think there's something absolutely wonderful about that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's, I don't know if intentional is the right word, but when I reflect back on this sort of anecdote that I'm sort of halfway telling, the song very much came to be tied to the thing that was happening in the scene, and the scene came to reflect the song in a way where I didn't necessarily plan it, but like I think that's the kind of thing that happens when you're, if you're listening to a lot of music, it actually affects the sorts of things you're thinking about. And
sure.
I don't know. I think it's a cool observation that you could view like the book sort of changes the meaning of the song. I like that.
Sure. Yeah. And just by the way, if you spell out Saint instead of abbreviating it ST, Crispy and St. Peter's has 19 letters.
Naturally. Yeah. It's funny because I bet this sort of shit was more impressive before the internet was as reliable as it is now, and you couldn't necessarily look up everything. So King kind of knowing all these references and being able to 19 everything was even more impressive.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder somewhere in King's storage, there's a Crispy and St. Peter's like A track or something.
For sure.
That he's kept for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Callahan gets closer to the rose and he hears its call for the first time. And I love this interaction because he falls in love with it just as much as everyone else did. And he has to resist very strongly, climbing over the fence and going to see it. But he actually has this interaction with this hippie that had acne. And I love this because this hippie realizes the power of this place. He doesn't quite understand it, but he realizes the power of this place. And this realization that other people can feel the power of this place besides just our Ka-tet feels important, and that it can actively work on things, right? That the rose cured this kid's acne is pretty fascinating. Yeah,
absolutely. It's different than maybe I assumed it was. It's more powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I love this little bit here, too, where he's thinking, Calla, Callahan, he thought, and then Calla, Callahan, Calvin, and then Calla come four, there's a rose behind the door, Calla come Callahan, Calvin's one more. So basically, he's kind of, this was the Kamala song that the children were singing during the Pied Piper parade, and now he's kind of taken his name and Callahan and this weirdness that he keeps focusing on and turned it into another verse of the song. Mm-hmm. So which Pied Piper then is leading Callahan here? Who is it?
Roland. No, wait, it's the rose, because the rose is actually bad.
Oh, is it?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Callahan grabs the zip code off of the fence. It's there right where Eddie told Calvin Tower to put it. But then he remembers that Google doesn't exist yet and decides that he has to head to a library to look up the digits to figure out where the hell they are. And we cut over, while this is happening, we cut over to Roland, who's kind of sitting in the cave waiting for him. He gets a little bored and he starts leafing through Cal's incredibly expensive collector's edition books with his dirty fucking gunslinger hands. His hands are filthy. Uh-huh. And the book costs $7,500.
Uh-huh. I love that you have different reactions than me sometimes.
Well, is that not a normal reaction?
It's just not what occurred to me.
So Roland is looking through these books, and we see he finds some Sherlock Holmes and then some other books. But then suddenly one book jumps out at him. On its cover is a church with a sun going down behind it. Roland can't really understand the words, so he can't read it. So we don't know what book this is. We don't know what any of this means, but we do know that this book feels powerful to Roland. It feels important, much like the rose. But then he says, but there were black roses too. So Matt, any guesses on what the hell this book is?
It's bad.
It's bad?
I mean, I've sort of been waiting for one of them to pick up a book that's, The Gunslinger by Stephen King, or maybe even Wolves of the Calla.
So that's what you think this is? You think this is Wolves of the Calla?
That was my first thought, honestly, because I was like, okay, we've got the church, could be Callahan's church. I mean, I believe that there is a cover of this book that is like, it's like somebody's hand hovering over a gun, and then in the distance you see the town. You can't necessarily identify that it's a church or not, but Like I can imagine that being, I don't know. I don't have any better guesses, I guess is what I'll say.
Did you go Googling book covers, Matt? Are you cheating?
No,
Are you a cheater?
I don't know why I've seen this book cover exactly, but.
No, I'm looking at it right now. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. No, it's in the, it's just like the default one.
There's not a church in it.
Okay. But it reminds me of a church.
Sure.
Which is totally the same thing.
Sure. Whatever. Yeah. We do see.
Go ahead.
No, I mean it is. It might be something. Might be nothing. No, I mean the book kind of makes it seem like it's the most important thing in the world, right? It compares it to the rose, which is the most important thing in the world.
I mean, it could be. There's a church in the Gunslinger too, so it could be the Gunslinger.
It could be. Yeah.
It could be something completely unrelated.
It could be. Yeah.
Yep. This is fun.
All we know, though, is that Callahan returns, letting us know that the Tower and Deep now headed to Maine. We're shocked. We're shocked that it's Maine. I can't believe it. Callahan can tell immediately that something is bothering Roland, but as we talked about before, Roland has chosen to hide the fact that he found this book from everyone again, and he plays off his weirdness as just the effects of the chimes, although that is kind of true on its own. But he does have some interesting questions for Callahan as they walk out of the cave. What is a novel? It's all pretend, right? It's all make-believe. And then the chapter ends with Roland thinking, Callahan. He made himself smile, made himself clap Callahan on the shoulder again.
Yeah. I'm telling you, it's the wolves of the Calla. That's what the book was.
Okay.
This is driving me insane. As soon as we get off the phone, I'm reading the rest of this book.
Even though it's going to be really late at night?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Well, let's finish the episode then.
All right.
And let's talk about chapter 5, the final chapter of this week, the meeting of the Falcon. Cool. Our final chapter this week, and it's finally time for the folk of the Calla to meet with the gunslingers and talk about what is to be done. The chapter opens up bringing us back in Tien Jafford's point of view, this is a place we haven't been since the prologue of the book, and there's kind of like a really nice full circle moment here, right? Tien is the one that started this whole thing, and despite his role basically being nothing but formula at this point, nothing but all he has to do is stand up there and announce Roland. He is the one that begins this process here 600 pages later. I love that Tien hears voices in his head, right? And again, we can say that sure, this is just King expressing like character through internal voices, but it also could be something magical. It could be the workings of Ka to give Tien the strength he needs to stand up in front of the entire town again and start this process again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the way Tien thinks about the voice in his head certainly makes it feel magical. It really draws attention to it. And I agree when I realized we were back in Tien's head, I was like, okay, this is the signal that the whole talking to people part of the book is done, and it is now time for gunfire.
Yes, that is true. But still, there's still some lying to do.
Yeah.
A few more lies.
Yeah.
The other thing that gives Tien a little bit of strength is those bombardier eyes. Roland, standing with his arms folded like the pears, caught Tien's eye and nodded slightly to him. Even by warm torchlight, the gunslinger's blue gaze was cold, almost as cold as Andy's. Yet it was all the encouragement Tien needed. I mean, look at this. Like, King keeps inviting us to compare our protagonist and hero to all the bad guys.
Yeah, right. I don't know if I've ever said this straight out, but like the reason the bombardier eyes quotation is so memorable is it's like war is terrible, but like the role of a bombardier is like a person who just like stares down at the landscape and just drops death upon it.
Yep.
And watches coldly as the bombs fall and just cause immense devastation and death. And that's why that image is chilling. And so the idea that Roland is this person who just like stands from afar and just leaves this wake, this literal path of destruction and death behind him. It's perfect and horrifying. And he's our protagonist. So, oh well.
And we love him.
Exactly.
So So Tien introduces Roland, and despite a few rumblings, it's clear at this point that most of the Calla are behind him. And Roland steps up to the plate, and we transition over to his point of view, and we get this wonderful passage. In each glazed and frightened eye, he read the same thing. He had seen it many times before, and it was easy reading. These people were hungry. They'd fain buy something to eat, fill their restless bellies. He remembered the piemen walking the streets of Gilead Lowtown in the hottest days of summer, and how his mother had called him Sepesai on account of how sick such pies could make people. Sepesai meant the death seller. I, he thought, but I and my friends don't charge. Holy shit.
That's great. It's so utterly cynical. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really wonderful.
Like he's basically admitting that he's bringing death to them, right?
Yeah. And even if they win, right? We didn't talk about it, but in the last chapter, that's like how they left their meeting was Jake saying, "Hey, Roland, I got one question for you. Can we win?" And Roland is like, I mean, prop maybe. He didn't seem that confident. Like the things are stacked against them.
Yeah, I mean, he has his plan and everything, but it's not some kind of, he doesn't have an ace in the hole that guarantees victory. Far from it.
And it's relying on a lot of things they can't be sure about, as we'll see as he starts to lay out the plan.
Mm-hmm.
So before he does that, though, he asks the questions one last time. You have opened to us. We have opened to you. Is it not so? Do you see us for what we are and accept what we do? Calla Falcon, do you seek aid and succor of us? They all reply, I say thank you. So that's it. The words have been said. It has been done. Mm-hmm. And now they must help. That is the code. Now they are going to be there. And this is it. Mm-hmm. This is it.
Yep.
And so Roland begins to outline his plan. The plan that, remember, we were specifically told is mostly all bullshit.
Yeah.
The twins of the town will all gather the night before the wolves arrive in a big tent put up by the ladies of the Ariza. Then they'll be taken away to hole up inside a cave to be all safe. The one thing I really like about this is as he's laying out this plan, we have these people in the crowd kind of shouting out and trying to stop this from happening, trying to convince the Falcon to not help out, to recognize this as stupid foolishness. But every time one of them does something, the Ka-tet handles it. Not just Roland, who is currently writing his thesis on bullshitting, but Jake and the others too. Like I wonder, like I love that time where like this has been tried before, and Jake just coolly says, but not by gunslingers. And like the crowd goes wild. And it's just like, they're so good at this. They really are so good at this.
Yeah. Yeah. They may not, their Ka-tet may not be repaired, but this is a great moment for them. Mm-hmm. And I did like the increasing desperation and anger of the, the appeasement faction as they realize like it's too late. This is getting out of their control. It strikes me as very, very realistic. And it makes me think that, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Like these people who don't want to fight, what are they going to do now?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what are they going to do tonight? I don't think they're just going to sit on their hands and go along anymore.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess we'll find out. I do think it's like, this is not, I guess, like, I don't know if you'd call this the honorable way to do these things, right? Like, it's just, it seems so interesting to me that like, they just kind of like, politicked their way into getting their way a little bit. I mean, I guess it's not inherently dishonorable, but they kind of lawyered their way to this thing where they knew the answers to the questions before they even asked them. And I while I am totally on the side of we need to stop these wolves, like I do understand the frustration of the rest of the people that are like, wait a minute, how, exactly when did this thing get out of control?
Yeah.
They're kind of relying on the fervor of the crowd to get what they want.
Yeah, right. I mean, I get what you mean, where Roland is really not conducting himself the way that you would kind of imagine a storybook knight would do.
Exactly.
He was much more subtle and manipulative, and never really gave them a choice in a certain sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, that's one thing we were told from the very beginning is they didn't actually have one.
Right.
No one ever had a choice.
Yeah.
The only choice is whether or not they will stand with them at the end.
Yeah, true.
And then Roland goes into what the wolves really are, and it's finally time for our big reveal of what's behind those masks, Matt.
All right.
They're zombies?
They're zombies. Wow.
To strike them in the brain is beyond our abilities because of the helmets they wear under their hoods, Roland said. But we saw such creatures in Lud. Their weakness is here. Again, he tapped his chest. The undead don't breathe, but there's a kind of gill above their hearts. If they armor over it, they die. That's where we'll strike them. Of course, we were told before, and we're told again, that this is like entirely and totally bullshit, right? We still don't know what the wolves are, Matt, and we still don't know why King has held off without telling us what they are for so long. But one thing we do know is they're not zombies with chest gills.
Yeah. No, I mean, so to be clear, they don't have any like chest vulnerability, right? As far as far as we know, it's just the top of the head, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's ever said that explicitly, but the game seemed to draw specific attention to the top of the head in a way that felt important.
Yes, and also that's how they killed the first one. So,
yeah, correct. Yes. One fun thing about this is that, like, I didn't notice until this read through, but that while Callahan is over in New York City, he's at the vacant lot, and one of the posters on the fence of the vacant lot is for a film called War of the Zombies, which is a very silly like 60s Italian film about like ancient Rome fighting with a zombie army. Like the Italian name is actually translated to Romans against Rome or something. And part of me is like, is this where Roland got the stupid zombies idea from?
Probably.
I mean, I'm sure Eddie has talked about zombies before, but I don't know if I don't think he like outlined this bullshit to the Ka-tet before he did here. I think they all comment on how they are impressed with his bullshitting. And I just wonder if he's like sitting in the unfound door cave, bored, waiting for Callahan to finish, trying to distract himself from the pain of the chimes, and like sees this zombie poster and is just like,
Yeah, I mean, another thought I had was maybe he actually did fight zombies at some point in his life.
Could be. Yeah.
I mean, who knows what's out there in Midworld? And then he was like, yeah, it'll be one of those zombies with the chest gill that I fought 500 years ago in some terrible place.
Yeah, I think this is so fun, Matt, because it's one of those times where we're still intrigued because we don't know what the wolves are, but we do know that this is all bullshit, and so we can find this obvious subterfuge like so delightful. Mm-hmm. I really like it.
Yeah, me too.
But it's interesting because, like, again, a lot of is going on faith here, right? They're lying, and the person who knows the truth is sitting in the audience right now, and he could blow it all up, and he doesn't. They rely on old man Jaffords, and he goes on with the lie. He even kind of participates in it because they like when they say about the chest, he's like, yeah, that's where what's her name hit him, and like he goes along with it. And yeah,
it's a huge amount of faith that they're putting in him. I guess I was kind of surprised it worked, but I think that it'll make more sense to me in retrospect once we find out what the wolves are. But right now, I'm like, how does he even know that there is a game afoot? Like, why is he not just confused? Yeah. Like, what the hell are you talking about? That's not what I told you. You know,
maybe he's got some voice speaking in his head.
Yeah, maybe so.
Those Jaffords is
Yeah, true. They do have a streak of the gunslinger in them.
Yeah. I wanted to spend a little time on this farming metaphor because I actually think this is really brilliant what happens here. Basically, Roland says he tells the story about tree farming back in Gilead and the story of how they would, cut down 2 but plant 3, right? So to keep the farm perpetually going. But then a plague came and started killing all the trees, and they just cut down the entire crop because they needed to save as much of the wood as possible. And he basically says, that's what's going to happen here, folks. We're going to stand up against these people. We're the plague, and they're probably going to panic and take all the kids if we fail. And it's interesting because he's using this to kind of counter some of the toughest resistance he's gotten so far. But it is also like terrifying that he's like basically admitting we're going to do this thing, and it is going to change whether we win or lose. We are admitting that this is going to change everything is going to change. Either we win and we never have to deal with these people again, or we lose and you're all fucked.
Yeah.
And the crowd is still so on his side that they're just like, that almost convinces them, then we have to fight.
Right.
Then we have to.
Right.
And that's really fascinating to me. And I think that shows just how much Roland has won the crowd over at that point.
Yeah, I think you're right, because the time for smiles has ended, and this is not actually a lie. This is just saying, like, there's no more persuasion. Now we're sort of crossed the Rubicon, and he's telling them the hard truths that will actually motivate them.
Yeah.
Which is more honorable than lying, I guess.
Sure. And I think the thing that he's trying to convince them now is they need to help fight. He's basically said, we're going to stand against the wolves. That's happening now. But if you choose to not bring your children to our tent, if you choose to not participate, you might be damning them worse than anything. True. Because this is happening now. Yeah. It is mixed in with all this bullshit as this beautiful, entirely honest moment of, this is what we're going to do. And if you don't participate, I worry about you.
Yeah.
So with the speech done, Roland gets into a one-on-one conversation with Ben Slightman, which I think is almost even more fun than the speech, because he's just lying his ass out to Slightman and trying to make Ben Slightman feel important while he's doing it. Like, he's letting him in on secret parts of the plan. He's saying, I trust you, Ben, but I can't tell this to the rest of the people. He asks him to guard the children in the cave, give him this all-important job. He tells them exactly where the gunslinger and his Ka-tet will be hiding to get the drop on the wolves. And, like, you can almost kind of imagine what's going on in Ben's head, where he's like, oh yeah, look, I got all this good information. I can't wait to get back to the Dogan and report all this stuff. I know everything. They're going to spare me for sure. I think it's really delightful.
Yeah. And as you kind of see Slightman, like, his eyes brighten as he thinks about how he's going to fuck over everyone. You're like, okay, I no longer care if this guy dies.
Yeah. And I wonder if part of that is Roland kind of testing him to see. I mean, part of it is he's needing to get him information to ensure that he has taken the bait. But yeah, like, one final test of, like, how is your reaction going to be to this? Like, I'm telling you that I trust you more than anyone else in the town. Is your reaction going to be like, oh, the guilt is going to drive you to finally be like, I got to tell you something, man. I've been betraying you. Or are you going to double down on it? And it seems like what Slightman has done is the latter.
Yeah.
So.
Seems like it, for sure.
Oh boy. This is it, though. This is it. This is the end of our chapter.
So excited.
And, we got to find out what happens next.
Yeah. We got to read about the gunfire.
The only thing we do see at the very end of this chapter is that Roland says there's going to be some digging to do. And we don't know what that means.
Yeah, I have no idea what that means.
Yeah. King's got to keep some stuff from us.
Yeah.
All right. So that is it for this week's reading. As we said, next week we'll be reading chapter 6 through the end of the book. Wow, I can't wait, Matt. I can't wait.
Yeah. I couldn't possibly be more excited. I mean, this is one occasion where, like, I know it's going to be crazy, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Either that or the book is somehow going to end without us actually resolving many things, which would be very, very confusing. I'm excited. Looking forward to it.
We will see. But first, we got to talk about some discussion question answers. Last week's discussion question was, Eddie gets another total badass moment. What is your favorite badass Eddie moment from the series so far? And the cool thing about the answers to this question, Matt, which we got several great ones, is a lot of people circled the same moments, but I think everyone brought their own, like, brand of why they enjoyed the moment or what that says to them. And so I thought this was a fun set of answers here.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so first answer is from Dark Gazing, who says, my favorite badass Eddie moment is also a nude-ass Eddie moment, the naked gunfight in Balazar's Leaning Tower restaurant. They say, if I recall, Roland asks what Eddie wants to do about them killing Henry, and he calmly replies, I want to go to war. I love that during the fight, Roland takes a second to reflect on how well Eddie is fighting, and that he's doing it all naked. I can't recall the exact text, but it but it may even be the first time Roland mentions the cold steel deep inside Eddie. He's shell-shocked afterwards, but it's the first badass moment of many on his road both to becoming a gunslinger as much as to the tower.
Yeah, it's not quite the first moment the cold steel is mentioned, but I think it's the first time we see it in action.
Yeah, and maybe the first time Roland recognizes it, perhaps. But yeah, no, certainly the moment where we realize, like, okay, this guy is capable of being a hero in a sense.
Yeah. Next up, we have Man of Zimmer, who says, my favorite Eddie moment has to be when he sets that fucking devil Blaine on fire with a dead baby joke. Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about this is the badass moment that got me to offer up this question was a very gunslinger-esque moment. It was Eddie being a gunslinger and threatening people. But like the Eddie Blaine moment is just a quintessential Eddie moment. Like that, it is Eddie. It is who Eddie is in the method in which he defeats Blaine. And I love it. I love it.
Yeah. No, I think that so far out of this list, that is winning my my contest for best moment. Dorian Tyros says there are a lot of badass Eddie moments, so it's tough to choose. That said, I've settled on the moment when Eddie has to fix the carved key. He's under such intense pressure. Susanna is being raped and going full dead in the process. Jake is literally about to die, and they can absolutely hear it. And he's on the precipice of giving into his despair about not quite getting the shape of the key. Yet, in the absolute last second, he manages to pull himself together, spot the tiniest incorrect piece, and somehow manages to carve off the exact paper-thin piece of wood he needs to while under all that pressure. Way to fucking go, Eddie. You show Henry he was wrong about your wood carving. The scene is so chaotic that you can just feel how it must have been trying to focus in on the key enough to tell what needed to be done. I love it.
Yeah. I think that it's a master class in writing that scene, and I agree. That's a wonderful Eddie moment.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite audiobook moments too, specifically because of the voice acting when he just, like, he's freaking out and then he just like holds out his hand and says knife, and you're just like you get chills, you know? Yeah.
I swear to God, we finished this. One of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and listen to all the books on audiobook just to say I've done it.
Yeah.
Because I've listened to bits and pieces piecemeal, but I really just want to have that experience.
It's so worth it. It's so beautiful.
All right, next we have Coves McGoves, who says, well, I love our introduction to Eddie and getting the first inkling that he has what it takes to be a gunslinger by fighting Badass. My favorite badass Eddie moment is when he takes control in the Riddling versus Blaine. It's my favorite because it's Eddie's true character, the jokester nature, that short circuits Blaine and saves the day, not him channeling something Roland would do or using a skill that he's learned in Midworld. We'd seen him grow a lot since coming through the door on the beach, but the idea that a piece of Eddie that won't go away is so integral to the group's success is proven in this scene. Yeah, Coz McGoves says what I was trying to say with the earlier mention of Blaine's riddling, but they say it way better than I did. That's beautiful, and I absolutely love it. That it is a piece of that is quintessentially him, not something he learned from Rowling, not something he picked up here, but a part of him, a core part of him. You know, we said way back in Drawing of the Three that there was a reason these people were chosen. There was a reason these people were drawn, and Eddie defeating Blaine is one of the clearest indicators of that.
Yeah, right. And as we saw later, it seems like Roland does need someone with this streak in them to complement him. That's that's also who Cuthbert is.
Yeah. Oh, and to kind of follow up on something we talked about last week, we had one of our listeners who did remind us that one time Roland did apologize. We asked, when has Roland ever apologized? One time we know Roland did apologize was to Eddie after the riddling Blaine.
Yeah. Which, interestingly, Eddie replied, "That's just your nature, Roland." So what a interesting thing to think about.
I said this right before, and now I read this next question in which they literally say that same thing. So I just didn't need to say that at all. But go ahead and read the answer, Matt.
All right. Unplucked Gem also mentions riddling Blaine. They say the tension builds over what feels like a super long time. Everyone else in the Ka-tet has given up on out-riddling Blaine. Susanna is getting frustrated with Eddie for just sitting there like a lump. The train is hurtling faster and faster toward their deaths in Topeka. Finally, he stands up and tears Blaine apart with his stupid dead baby joke. I think this is also where Roland realizes Eddie's worth to the Ka-tet. He even cries Eddie's pardon on top of the train. Yeah. and says he's forgotten the face of his father. Yeah. Yep. That's true.
Yep. Thank you for reminding us of that unplucked gem. We really appreciate that. Puller420 says, my favorite badass Eddie moment is in the drawing of the three fighting Balazar and his henchman Sans clothing. On top of the fact that he was naked, he had to witness his brother's severed head rolling through the room and keeps his cool enough to survive. This sets the tone for all future badass Eddie moments. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, that's true. I want to go back and read that scene in light of like who I understand Eddie to be now, you know?
Yeah. It is also interesting. Like, one of the things we haven't talked about is I do think Stephen King, as a person who writes like ultra violence, has kind of calmed down as he's gotten older.
Uh-huh.
And I wonder if like 2003 Stephen King would have had them like toss Henry's severed head into the room. I don't know. Maybe when we get to the violence coming in the future of these books, we can compare.
Yeah. Well, I thought old Jaffords' memory of the fight with the wolves was actually pretty, visceral and violent.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's worth thinking about. Pear Jane says, my favorite badass Eddie moment is the one in this episode when he pistol whips the mobsters. Between his clever greeting, bon mots, and vile threats, he's just having so much fun. It demonstrates how he's witty, quick thinking, fast on his feet, scary, and confident AF. And also adorable, because even Gunslinger Eddie is still charming enough to be adorable.
Love it.
Do we know who Eddie Dean was going to be in the Dark Tower TV show that isn't going to happen now, so that I can be sad about that?
I don't. So the Dark Tower TV show, I think we're far enough in the book to tell you this now. The plan for the first season was mostly Wizard and Glass stuff, so I don't think they had cast Eddie Dean yet. Right. So no, we do not.
So I don't have to be sad about that not ever happening. Good.
No.
Okay.
Next we have all 84001 who says, best badass Eddie Dean moment, one of his first, totally ghosting the customs agents at JFK. Red marks on his chest from ripping the tape off, allergies. Track marks on his arm, mosquito bites. Why does he know so much about drugs? Miami Vice. And the coup de grace, why didn't he open the bathroom door when the entire flight crew was practically banging it down? He was taking a crap and he couldn't reach the handle. Which prompts one of the all-time funniest lines in the series. You'd think no one had ever taught him the simple trick of leaning forward.
I love that.
Pure gold.
I still remember loving that. That was the funniest thing ever. Yeah.
I mean, we've gotten to the point in the book series where like I am both incredibly excited for what's to come and also incredibly like nostalgic about what we've been through so far.
Yeah.
And answers like this really make me like saying, oh, remember back when we were at the drawing of the three and there's this amazing scene with Eddie Dean and the customs agents. Oh, wonderful.
I just love like the ridiculous obviousness of the lies and him just saying it completely unapologetically is a great Eddie substance.
God, I love Eddie Dean.
Yeah.
I love him so much.
All right. Jezebelzebub says, my favorite example of Eddie's badassery is tied between Eddie versus the airplane cops and Eddie and the dead baby versus Blaine. Eddie's badassery is, to me, directly tied to his ability to perpetrate well-aimed fuckery. It's like his mind is 3 steps ahead of his brain and 5 steps ahead of everyone else. Like, maybe Eddie doesn't really know what he's going to do until he's already doing it. Just wind up and watch him go. Yeah, I like that description a lot, actually, because it seems like all of his best moments are just seat of the pants moments. He's not calculating. He's intelligent. He's very intelligent, but rarely are his greatest moments due to having thought something through ahead of time.
Yeah. But they are always, the thing I like about Eddie is he always stands up in the moment. He never shies away from the moment. Like, he finds these things in him, and it's not like he's planned for it and calculated out the best path forward, but like he recognizes, I need to step up here. I need to step up and do this thing. And then he does it. He does it. And he's still stressed about it, like with the key, and he's still but he just goes.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, for sure.
which one were we on? Complicated 9519 says, you can't ask what my favorite badass Eddie moment is when you know it's obviously a tie between Blaine's defeat and the naked shootout. They are both amazing in their own way. The way Eddie takes out an all-knowing AI with silly trick questions, and the way Eddie blasts away a whole gang of people in an army of two with nothing but his broken wits and Roland to aid him. Yeah. Those are some great moments. I totally agree.
Yep. Nick Grew says they're going to go with something different and just say that Eddie's badassery can be summed up with simple dialogue. Eddie, Ka, Roland, nodding, Ka. Eddie, Ka. Eddie's the guy that can always cut through the tension you're feeling and leave you with a laugh and a smile. We all need an Eddie in our lives.
I agree.
Yeah. Then no, I mean, stuff like that is great because if you don't have your Eddie, it's just unrelentingly self-serious Roland.
Yeah.
Like I've always sort of said like the biggest problem with all of the later Star Wars movies is that they didn't have Han Solo, because you have to have a character who is there to laugh at everything that's happening and how ridiculous it is.
Sure.
And be sarcastic and be snarky. If you don't have that, then it's just self-serious nonsense.
I mean, they did try to make those characters. They just didn't work.
Well, in the sequel trilogy, they certainly tried to. In the prequel trilogy, I don't even know if they tried to do that at all.
Well, they kind of tried to make Obi-Wan that. I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk about Star Wars.
No, I think you're right that they kind of tried to, but they didn't really succeed at all.
Sure. Steve D says, I became a devout Eddie fan when he was confronted by the customs agents in Drawing of the Three. When we first meet him, we don't know what to think. Maybe just some junky drug mule. When he meets with customs, he is quick on his feet, funny, and focused. He knows the drugs are stashed on the beach in another world, so he can be the wise ass he was born to be. It puts the reader in a weird spot. We're not supposed to root for the drug smuggler. Luckily, he soon becomes the guy that we do root for. And Steve D finishes up with a side note. I won't hear another disparaging word towards the content or logic of Back to the Future from Matt.
No, I was just referring to that particular school of how time travel works.
You can't say bad things about Back to the Future, Matt. You're not allowed to.
I wasn't. I never would.
I don't even remember what the conversation was.
What am I being accused of? This is unfair.
Matt, I need you to say the sentence, Back to the Future is a perfect film.
Back to the Future is a perfect film.
Okay, there we go. We're good. There you go, Steve.
Yeah. All right. Finally, Rebecca B says, I'm sure a ton of people are going to answer, but the scene where are going to answer this same answer, but the scene where Eddie takes down Blaine is by far my favorite. I really like the Blaine scene because it allows Eddie to shine in a way that is so quintessentially Eddie. Mm-hmm. No one but Eddie could have done that. I also like the fact that everyone, even Roland, was doubting him, and in the end, he proved them wrong. He made them see his importance and his abilities, and I can see the scene clearly in my mind when he charges the end of the cabin, firing the gun into Blaine's face, screaming in triumph and grinning ear to ear. God, I love Eddie.
I do too.
Yeah, I like what you said earlier about everyone kind of focusing on a different aspect of why this is great, because I do agree with Rebecca B here that one of the many things that makes this scene great is that everyone is like, oh, well, Eddie's just sitting there being worthless. I guess we have to figure this out. Mm-hmm. And then he's the one who solves it. Like that kind of makes it.
It does. What about you, Matt? What's your favorite Eddie moment?
I hadn't thought about it, but out of the ones that people have listed here, I think, just in terms of my raw enjoyment, I did really enjoy the airplane duel. I think the Blaine riddling scene is one of the things that I will take away from the Dark Tower and just sort of cherish forever.
I agree. I'm going to go somewhere a little bit different. Not that I don't think all these moments are great. And I think, by using the word badass, I kind of invited people to think of like a big kind of bombastic scene. But like one of my favorite things about Eddie is like some of his quieter moments. And the thing I'm thinking of specifically is the moment when he's, post jump rope session, when he's looking at Susanna and just saying, I love this woman and I love her more than she loves me. And all I can do about that is just keep on loving her and try to protect her as best as I can. And that's pretty badass too.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, a really important part of Eddie's character as well. And I love the riddle scene. I love I totally agree with everything everyone else said, but on this read through, that scene affected me almost as much as all these big bombastic moments. I really cherish that moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of great moments like that. He's a great multi-dimensional character.
He's so fucking good. He's so fucking good. I love you, Eddie Dean.
All right.
Next week's question, Matt, another fun one, I think. What is your favorite malevolent artificial intelligence / robot characters? Now that I'm saying this, I feel like maybe we've asked this question before. Maybe we did when Blaine was in the... Look, if there's a bunch of people that are listening that weren't listening then, so if we have asked this exact same question before, just answer it. Just do it.
Yeah. Sounds
what is
good.
your favorite AI or robot? Answer.
I want more answers.
Yes, there can never be enough answers. Let us know. And that is it for us here on Kingslingers. Next week, somehow, already, we're finishing the book. We're finishing. This one went by so fast to me. I can't believe it. We'll be reading from chapter 6 all the way through the epilogue for next week's episode.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a weird sense of the pacing of the book, honestly. But I'm very excited to be finishing it.
I wonder if we can talk about that in our overview episode in a couple weeks.
Sure.
I'm interested to see what you think about that, or what you have to say, rather.
Cool. Remember, you can reach out to us via email at kingslingerspod at gmail.com or on Twitter at kingslingerspod, or head on over to the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia and answer in the thread there.
Yep. And if you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts. I think there's like a new one now that I've got to get us on. Like, everyone's getting in the podcast game. I've got to get us on a new service.
Yeah,
we're in Teslas, baby.
That's right. We're on Alexa. I'm sorry for saying that out loud.
Oh no.
If you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia. If you donate to us at the $5 per month level, you'll gain access to our monthly Doof and Chill sessions, where a group of members of the Doof Podcasting Network will hop online and hang out with our patrons for a couple of hours. We play games and do other goofy shit. This month's session is Saturday, the 26th of September at 9:30 p.m. Central Time.
Yes, Central Time.
We'll be messing around in the new game Among Us, which I have not heard of, but it sounds really fun from what people have told me.
I've never played it, but I've watched people play, and it's the exact kind of fun nonsense party game thing that I think people will very much enjoy.
Yeah. So if you donate at $5, you'll be able to hang out with us, and if you miss that time slot, then you can always just watch that later and just laugh at us asynchronously.
That's the best kind of way to laugh at us, asynchronously.
That's right. New Doof dancer this week is Jen W. Welcome, Jen.
Yeah, Jen, join us on the stream on Saturday.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
And if you cannot afford to donate to us right now, that is absolutely okay. The world is still literally on fire, so we understand. You can help us out, though, by sharing this podcast with all your Stephen King loving friends and family, or just randomly on social media. And you can always help us out by leaving us a rating and a review. This week's Spotlight review comes from Time Lord Steven. We got a Time Lord listening to our podcast. That's pretty great.
Yeah.
Time Lord Steven gives us 5 stars and says, "Hi, all Kingslingers. Praise the podcasters. Hello, Scott and Matt. I've been listening to the show since episode 1 while I was on my first journey to the tower with book 4. Now you guys have just posted episode 25, and I'm halfway through book 7. Oh, what a journey it's been, both reading and listening to you guys discuss what might turn out to be my favorite book series. Since then, I've gone to listen to the Doofcast, which is another fun show, and been combing through the back catalog of that. Finally, I'd just like to give praise to you both for producing an awesome episode every week, and I can't wait for the show to get to book 7. Long days and pleasant nights, Kingslingers." Well, Time Lord Steven, thank you so much. That's so cool that you jumped on board on your first read through of the series. That's so fun. I love it.
Yeah, no, this is so exciting. And yeah, thanks for mentioning the Doofcast, because now I can remind those of you who didn't search up the Doofcast when I told you to, go search up the Doofcast and subscribe to that.
We are about to hit episode 100 of the Doofcast, so there are plenty of episodes. Even if you haven't seen some of the things, you'll find something there you'll like.
Yeah.
All right, folks, that's it for us this week. We will see you here next week as the wolves finally arrive. Or do they? Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.